Hi there, this is Keith Waits. I'm here talking with Carol Wyatt. She is an animation designer, painter, and supervisor with over 35 years of experience in television and film. She is known for her work on the first four seasons of The Simpsons, as well as Hey Arnold, Rocco's Modern Life, Nightmare Ned, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, The Ricky Gervais Show, Over the Garden Wall, Amphibia, Rick and Morty, and many more. She has designed the look for TV series such as Nightmare Ned, Hey Arnold, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and Camp Lazlo, while contributing her painting style to animated features and independent films. She will be in Louisville in just a few days at the invitation of Kentucky to the World to do a live program at the Speed Art Museum on November 1st. That's, I think it begins at 6:30. There's a reception at 5:30 p.m. There are tickets available. And I'll talk more about that after we talk to Carol. I want to talk to Carol. Hi, Carol.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So you're from Louisville
hmm
originally. This program does like to talk to Louisville-born or based artists, and so you're born, but of course you're based out in LA, Hollywood, because you work in the animation television industry.
Right,
Uh,
I live in Glendale.
Glendale.
Yeah,
Oh, Glendale. I don't know the neighborhoods out there. Is that where Mark Maron lives? I'm trying
it's
to remember.
I don't know, but it is the suburbs of
Yeah,
Los Angeles.
right. So you're not in Hollywood per se. Do you go into Hollywood when you go to work,
Uh, if
or do you,
I have to,
do you work mostly from home?
I work from home still, but we mostly animation and a lot of the studios are in Burbank. So we mostly work
Okay,
in Burbank.
right. I have a friend there in Burbank. We'll talk about that later. So you started in Louisville and you went to school. When did you first go to California?
1983, I graduated from high school. I went to St. Francis High School, which I think has a new name now. And I moved out to Los Angeles to go to Otis Parsons in Los Angeles.
Right. And so what happened from school to profession? Like, how did you
Oh,
work your way in? Were there some things that happened at Otis Parsons?
well, it's a great school. And at the time, Otis and Parsons were together. So
Mhm.
now they're separate schools. Parsons in New York and Otis is out here. But at the time, they were merged. And so you could go to New York for a semester, which I did, and then come back here and live in LA. I finished in Los Angeles. But I was a graphic design major originally. And my plan was to be in advertising and be like an ad exec and make lots of money and decide things. And then I ended up not really enjoying that at school. I was good at it, but I didn't really love doing it. I was painting all the time and drawing everything and hanging out with the illustration department. And there were
Cool
some
kid.
great teachers. Yeah, the cool kids, right? And I just wanted to draw and paint. That's all I wanted to do. And even though there was this goal to do this kind of more, I don't know, corporate type of thing, it was, I really didn't love it. So I figured that out in school and I changed to illustration and I became an illustrator. And so I was doing editorial illustration during school and when I graduated. So I was working for like the LA Times, LA Weekly, Good Housekeeping, 17 all the magazines back
Mhm.
then, which now everything's online, but back then it was all print. And the cool thing to do was to do album covers or things like that. So I was lucky I got a lot of little jobs like that. And then a friend called and said, "Hey, we need painters for Saturday morning cartoon. Do you want to paint?" Sure, I'll go paint. Let's try it out. And I went and painted on this show called Cops, and there were a few going at the same time, the Real Ghostbusters, Cops, and there were a few others. And I went over and painted, and it was like a 3 month job. And I thought, this is the best. I want a 3 month job. Now I look at 3 months as like, that's not very much work. But back then it was way better than doing an editorial illustration that was one job and one check that you might get in 3 months. And so I loved it and just kind of fell into it.
So you just thought it was a temporary gig. I mean, when did you know that it was
Right.
a temporary gig?
Um, it took a while for me to figure that out. I just kept taking any work I got. And so I started working on commercials, like Keebler commercials, and helping on music videos and anything that came along, and your name gets passed around. And so people would call and say, hey, you want to do some assistant animation, or you want to paint cells, or you want to. And I said yes to everything. So I didn't really realize until I was on The Simpsons supervising the color department halfway through like second season, and I was like, do I like this job? That was when I finally realized, wait a minute, this is kind of turning into a career. Like, I better reassess and see if this is something I want to do.
Well, it seems
And
like
of course it was.
that's how the best things happen sometimes.
Right, right. You kind of fall into it and the road just takes you wherever you go.
So you were doing Saturday morning cartoons, and then how long were you doing that before the Simpsons job came up?
Oh, that was in 1987. So
So,
started on The Simpsons the following year in 88.
oh, so quickly. So did you have any sense? I mean, The Simpsons is, I don't know what to even call The Simpsons. It's iconic. It's like this bigger than life sort of thing that's been part of our world for so long. But those first episodes, those first years, did you have a sense that that was a big deal?
We did after the first few episodes aired
Mhm.
because the ratings were through the roof. And what was amazing about that at that time, because now it's hard to imagine this, but um, there there was only one cable station, Fox, and it wasn't even in every state back then. It was only in
Mhm.
a few states. And we were getting these huge ratings going up against like the Cosby Show and Roseanne and 60 Minutes. And we were in those categories of ratings, and we weren't even in every state. So it was kind of insane. We had no idea that it was going to be that big. No, you never could have predicted. We thought we'd all be out of work after the first episode aired. We were all talking at the party like, oh, let's go look for our next job because we won't have work next week. So we had no idea. And but as soon as the ratings started coming in, and then all of a sudden, more executives jump in, they want to take credit, then you start realizing there's something happening here.
Well, and if memory serves, I don't believe there was an animated show on in
No,
prime when that happened.
no,
I
it
think that
wasn't
was
the
at least
first one.
60. Yeah.
Right. It wasn't the first animated show for prime time because the Flintstones
Mm,
was on before and the Jetsons, but that
mm,
was long before the Simpsons.
right.
And then, yeah, so it didn't exist. And now it would be really hard for anyone, young now to understand that there was nothing like that then. It didn't exist. There wasn't a prime time animated show. Now you have your pick, from so many. So
Well, and that show started, probably very few people remember this. I'm old enough to remember that, and of course you remember, but that show started, The Simpsons were segments on
Tracy Ullman.
Tracy Ullman. Thank you. Her name just escaped
Yeah.
me. On the Tracy. Were you working on those segments, or did you come in only when the series happened?
I loved the Tracy Ullman show, and those shorts were some of my favorite cartoons. And I was a big fan of Matt Groening and his cartoons, that his comics. I was a huge fan of his comics. He had Life in Hell and some other drawings that he did. And we were all in LA, and you would see that stuff a lot. And so when those shorts were happening, and I was looking for animation work, I was kind of getting into it. I saw a listing for Klasky Chupo, which is the studio that originally did The Simpsons, and they had a picture from the shorts, and I was like, "Oh, I want to work there. That's where I want to go." So I called and set up an interview and went in and got hired. So that was it was amazing. But I kind of pursued it because I really liked the shorts. But no, I did not work on the shorts. I started on the first season at the beginning.
Well, it's interesting too. Because I think of Matt Groening. He was not a mainstream guy. Like his
No,
cartoons and everything, they were very edgy, and the style of the early Simpsons stuff is not as polished as it would eventually become. I mean, and part of that
right.
might have been budgetary, but it also seemed to fit his sense of humor and the overall aesthetic of it.
Right. I mean, he was a rebel and
Yeah,
he had an underground comic. And underground comics were really big in the 80s too.
yeah.
It was kind of a rebellious time and there were punk rockers and so he fit right into that. And Klasky Chupo was a small studio and they took those kinds of risks. They were like they wanted to do what was called cool animation, which is what Gabor, who's one of the owners, he would always say, we're making cool animation.
Well, so you did 4 years on The Simpsons. What? No,
Yeah.
why did you leave? Did you get a good job offer somewhere else, or what was the situation?
Burnout. I was tired. Yeah, it was a lot, because it was new and there wasn't anything else like that. We were working 6 days a week around the clock, and I was on call. I was getting calls from Korea in the middle of the night, because I was a supervisor. And so it just got so tiring. And there were just other things I wanted to try. So it wasn't like I quit. It was more of like I really want to try this. I gave them a few months notice. I said, and people were sad about it. I was sad about it, but I was like, no, I need to keep moving. And I wanted to art direct, I wanted to direct, I just wanted other jobs. So, and I'm glad I did that because I ended up doing a lot of different jobs. Whereas some of my friends who started out with me, they're still there. They're still on The Simpsons.
Are they like big shot producers now, or are they all still doing the art?
No, some of them wanted to stay as layout artists, and some of them are directors now. Yeah.
Because I could see how I think it's hard to imagine just watching it. It seems like a cartoon is a simple thing, right? Nobody probably immediately understands the amount of work, and because what you're talking about is so demanding and such a grind. But also then I think if you come off saying like, yeah, I just did 4 years of The Simpsons, 4 years of The Simpsons, you're probably a pretty hot commodity, right? Like people are going like, oh, okay, you know what you're doing.
Well, it's true. And I think I learned the most on that show. I don't think you could learn more from any. We had some of the best directors ever. I mean, Brad Bird and Rich Moore both have won
Mhm.
Oscars, for their films. And, these are the people that you're working with every day and they're teaching you animation. So it was kind of on the job training and by some of the best people you could ever work with. So it definitely, yeah, it carried some weight when you would say, yeah, I'm coming off of The Simpsons. But then, new cartoons came up and new shows that didn't want that. They didn't want a sitcom thing. And so
Mhm.
it would run against you when you go for those jobs.
Well, looking at the kind of work that you feature on your website and stuff like that, it doesn't seem like there's a place for that work in The Simpsons, which is this kind of flat,
Hmm.
um, deliberately, intentionally flat style.
Right,
Uh,
right.
so what was your describe your job though for just a second on The Simpsons, so we can kind of contrast it to what you started doing later.
Oh, okay. Well, I started as background cleanup because everything was on paper back then. It was still traditional animation. So I would clean up the drawings and then I became a designer, because you're drawing backgrounds all day. Eventually they say, okay, can you design some? And then I also did color because they loved my sense of color. And it was actually Brad Bird who was like, we want you to do the color and set up this department. And we did have people already doing that and they just wanted to like streamline and make a department, so they put me in charge of that. And so that's kind of how that all got going. But we would have like Butterfinger commercials and things for The Simpsons and I would animate on those. So I got to do all the different jobs, but really that was when I started as a color supervisor, like learning about how that works.
So that enabled you to kind of figure out where you really wanted to be.
It did, but I pretty much jumped around for years. I did a lot of art directing and assistant art directing for a while, and then I would go back to designing or painting, and sometimes animating. I kind of jumped around. I learned a lot of jobs for a long time. I jumped.
Well, so you said earlier you want to direct. Have you directed?
I assistant directed a stop motion project for Turner back in the day.
Is that
But
something?
I didn't want to continue directing. No, it was fun for that project because it was stop motion and that was just really fun to do. It was a whole new experience. But I found myself mostly in art direction or supervising. That's kind of I just naturally gravitate towards painting and then towards supervising. I do like running a department and holding together a good crew of people. That's something I really love to do.
So you're the boss, or
Yeah, for my department.
well, then at some point in your career you move into designing. When it says in your bio you're designing the look,
Hmm.
what does that mean? Does that mean you're in on the ground floor
Hmm.
the creation of a show, talking about making decisions about the look and design and the character of the show?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, for example, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Craig McCracken, that's his show. And he and the art director they wanted me to do the color and design the painting, the look for it. And so they hired me specifically to do that. And then I went on to the series. But yeah, you come in and you're basically meeting with the show creator and an art director if there is one, or you're the art director, and you talk about it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of figuring out kind of what you're going for, what the feel is, and the characters. Why are we doing this? What are we trying to say about the characters and what kind of stories are we telling? And then you go from there and you just start doing a lot of little roughs and paintings. They're really small, cute paintings, and you do a million of them. And then it kind of evolves into what it becomes. And then we had to translate it all to the computer because that's when we started working on computers.
In that process,
Yeah.
do you, I mean, when you're working and stuff like that, do you sometimes develop a whole concept and then suddenly everybody goes, no, we
Oh
have
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. You have to be tough. And I mean, usually when they hire you for something like that, it's because they want what you do. You're hiring people specifically for their style, kind of. And so they knew what they were getting and they loved what I did. But like Camp Laszlo, that was Joe Murray's style, not my style, but I took his style and kind of I came up with some ideas for how I wanted to look like these 50s pillows that I had. These kind of kitschy, old painted pillows. And they just had this cool look to them. And so I would use things for reference and then I would develop it to make it look like he did it, but my paintings.
well, so this is basically, it's like being the production designer for a film that
Exactly.
you don't have to spend billions of dollars or whatever. You can create it all, but it's all those kinds of decisions about stuff that a lot of people watching might not even always pick up on,
They
right?
don't know, and a lot of it's subliminal. You're making decisions about things that, especially color is subliminal. It's all about the feeling, what you're trying to get across, and the lighting. So a lot of times people have no idea that you're doing certain things to evoke certain feelings on a show or on a movie.
Right. They just know they feel that way.
Right. Right. They're like, oh, this is really sad. And you're like, good. Yeah, did it.
ever thought about getting into some live action stuff, or have you done any live action stuff?
No, I haven't. I've only done stop motion. Yeah, I'm not really, I love animation. I really love it.
You don't work with the actors when they're recording your voices and stuff like that.
No, I don't do that part. No.
Even just for fun, like, hey, can I come watch a recording session?
Oh yeah, no, it is fun. Yeah, no, they're a lot of fun. And actually, when I worked on the Cleveland show at Fox, we were required to be in the table reads, and so I loved that. I was like, wow, they're finally bringing us in for the table readings, and it was really cool because we got to see everybody doing their first passes on their lines, and I got to meet Carl Reiner. That was amazing.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, one of my like idols of all
Oh
time.
yeah, oh yeah. I grew up watching reruns of the Dick Van Dyke Show. Oh my god.
Hmm. Huge. I told him I was a huge fan, that Dick Van Dyke was like everything for me when I was a kid. And he was like, "You're not that old." And I was like, "No, I am. I watched it."
Well,
It was really good.
too, they. I feel like they've
Yeah.
not quite disappeared. There was a moment in time, I think, like all the classic black and white sitcoms kind of did disappear when there was a lot of modern stuff to, but they've always been there somewhere. There's always a channel somewhere showing the old shows.
Well,
Um,
that's what I remember about Louisville too. Like if I was homesick one day or something, they would always play old reruns in black and white, like show of shows. Like that was how I saw show of shows, and some of those older shows, um, just because they were on like when I was sick or on a weekend or something.
well, and do you feel like some of those comedies, have an influence on uh, animation that would come later? I mean, when you talk about something like the Flintstones, the Jetsons, the Simpsons are all very much like sitcoms in their
They
structure.
are.
So a lot of the classic sitcoms, I mean, Fred Flintstone is, Jackie Gleason, right? Ralph Cramden, obviously. But I mean, like, so do you see that sort of sensibility either through your work or through your colleagues' works uh, coming through?
Oh yeah. No, it's a huge influence. And I mean, especially when you talk about The Simpsons, because that was treated as like Jim Brooks wanted it to be a sitcom that just happens to be animated. I mean, that was his goal. And I mean, he definitely accomplished that. And so it was kind of cool because all of our writers also came from, like, they came from Taxi and they were sitcom writers. They came from Harvard Lampoon. I mean, we had Conan O'Brien on, as a writer for a while. And yeah, so you have these amazing sitcom writers or television writers, and it kind of whole new element to animation. We didn't have that before. It was, Looney Tunes, and which is great,
Yeah.
but totally different type of animation.
Do you have any juicy Conan O'Brien stories?
I didn't really know him. I met all the writers. I think he was their second season, and he was only there for a short time. But no, I mostly have stories with writers that would call me and ask me to change things a lot.
So okay, and that's interesting because you would think like that maybe there's less of that going on. Like if a writer changes something, why does that impact
Mm.
background on color or
Well, that is so, that's a can of worms. So when a writer when a writer wants to change something later, when it gets to I'm at the end of the line, right before animation. So it's already been storyboarded, recorded, storyboarded, designed, and then colored and painted, and then we're shipping it to be animated. So when it gets to me, if something is being changed, that's trouble. That could cost a lot of money because that usually means it has to be redesigned as well. So that goes kind of backwards against the pipeline. However, like Dan Harmon, we're used to changing things with Dan where we kind of predict it and we kind of are ready for his changes because we know that he always pluses things. I mean, I can't even criticize it because the changes that come in are so good that, that you're like, okay, well, that was worth it. We have to change this, and it makes sense. So, you just kind of roll with it. But it is very costly when a writer wants something changed. But a lot of times on The Simpsons, there were a couple of writers who would call me, and I think it was more they wanted to vent. Sometimes I would have to change something because it was a story issue. But if it wasn't a story issue, it was just something they just really wanted a certain way, just because they liked it a certain way. That was an argument, or I would say you have to talk to the director. That's above my pay grade, and I'm not gonna I'm not gonna stop this wheel that's in motion until someone else tells me to. But they just like to complain. And of course we became friends because of it. You're on the phone and they're like, why, but why are you doing this? And I'd be like, well, and they'd be like, but why, but we don't like it. Like, okay. And then I'd run into them out in the world somewhere, like at a movie theater, and we'd be like, Carol, how are you? So they were they were really fun to work with, but very opinionated.
Well, is some of that driven by, I mean, I don't know, like can animation be really topical because you have such a production, you have
Mm-hmm.
a schedule that means you can't sort of, is that ever a part of it that they're trying to be topical or current, knowing that as soon as they let go of it, it's a long time before it's going to be done.
At least 6 months. Yeah. Well, The Simpsons, they've managed to, like, I haven't worked on it in years, but I do notice that they have jokes that they put in that come out like a week after it happens. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they insert those things so quickly, but yeah, generally it's about 6 months after something is typed up, so, or recorded. And yeah, that's a long time. So you have to be more generic with your topical information. You can't be hyper specific, but you can still talk about COVID or something that, is happening, you know.
Well, I imagine sometimes it's just, I mean, not that it's easy, but you can drop in a, you can record a line maybe very late in the process and drop that in without having to change the animation or design work. I imagine that's probably
Right.
what.
Well, the
Um,
way it works on our show, like on Rick and Morty, when Dan wants to change lines, because he very often does change lines, and we do have an animation team at the end that so when everything comes back in color, they can quickly revise, dialogue, or because if it's just dialogue and if there isn't a lot of acting attached, it's easy to fix, But if there's a big moment or an explosion or action that is difficult to fix at the end.
so in the material that Kentucky to the World sent me, they refer to you as legendary animator.
That's nice. That's so funny because I guess if you work, I mean, maybe this has happened to you. If you work long enough at something, you become a legend because you've been doing it for 35 years. And if it's television and you've worked on more than, like, I think I've worked on more than 32 TV series or something, then yeah, whatever, that's some kind of a legend, I guess. But really, it's just work. It's just the work that you do. But I did just start teaching at Cal State Long Beach, and my first day I came in, my students they're seniors in animation, and they looked me up. I came in the classroom, so they were a little bit shy at first, and they were very respectful. But I started to talk, and I heard in the back, "You're a legend," and I started laughing, and I go, "Yes, all right."
but but I gotta say it. I'm not to just be like sort of like empty flattery, but I feel like legends should look a lot older. Like when you like like an old guy with gray hair or balding, and that's a legend. That's a
Yeah.
legend.
Well, when I take off my mask, no.
Well, but so I mean, and I'm not going to ask your age, but like it seems like you did get started in the business when you were very young, so that's a part of why you can say 35 years. But you because you were fresh out of school and you seem like you got
Mhm.
work.
Quickly. Yeah, I got work. I started working in animation in 1987.
Yeah.
So it's been a while, but yeah, I was young. I was young. And on The Simpsons, we talk about this a lot, the directors and I like Wes Archer is one of the original directors, and we're still very good friends. And we talk a lot about how immature we were on The Simpsons because we were all in our 20s and we were supervising people under immense pressure and the show became extremely popular fast. So there was no template and there was no training. There were no business schools or training back then to say, oh, you need to supervise this way. It was like I slammed a door because I was angry, and people are really immature at that age. And Wes was a director, I was a supervisor, and we were all very young, very inexperienced. We learned quickly.
Well, there's an old axiom about people that accomplish really great things. A lot of times do it because they don't know any better. Like they don't have experiences for them to say we shouldn't do it that way, so they just do it however which way they can come to. You just figure it out and you just do it. That sounds
It's
like that.
so true. Yeah, and I mean now, everything is corporate and now we have to take trainings and I don't mind because I like learning new things, but I'm not very good at these trainings because I it's all information that I've been winging it for so long, and they're like, "Oh, you can't say this, you can't do that. Here's the protocol for this." And I'm like, "Oh, I had no idea." You know, I'm so glad I'm learning this now in my 50s.
Oh, I was told you I wasn't going to ask you.
Oh, I don't mind. I'm 58. Woohoo!
You do not look 58.
Well, if you work in animation or entertainment, yeah, there's some ageism. You do have to like keep up with the younger crowd.
But does it also come from always working inside? I mean, you probably used to work in dark rooms a lot, right? And maybe that,
Yeah.
not so much
Yeah,
time.
right. We can't take our computers out in the sunlight. No.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about this event. Um,
Okay.
Wednesday, November 1st at the Speed Museum, and you're going to be, let's see, they have you paired with somebody named where's the name?
Brooke Kiesling.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Um, so do you know her, or is she just interviewing you for this, or have you worked with her?
We actually, I don't think we've ever worked on the same project, but we have known each other for years, and we were at Disney at the same time and became very close friends there. She is in charge of talent development at Bento Box, and Bento Box is a really hip, awesome studio. They do like they're doing Krabopolis, and they do a lot of great shows. And she was also talent development at Cartoon Network. She at Disney. So she's made her rounds. She's like president of this, and she's in the academy, and so she's way up there. But she agreed. I said, "Could you come interview me?" And she said, "Yes, let's go." So I'm very excited that she said yes. I'm really honored, and I'm really honored that they chose me. I had no idea that was coming.
Well, how did that? I mean, did you know Shelley Ziegert with
I
Kim?
do know Shelley, but I hadn't seen her or talked to her in at least 30 something years. And her daughter Terry and I grew up together. We were really close friends. But I got an email from her and she said, "We've been following your career. We want to feature you for Kentucky to the World for our speaker series." And I was like, "What do you want to feature?" And I was like, "What does that mean?" And I mean, I kind of it's easy for me to talk about my work. I can talk about it all day. I've been on panels and I've been interviewed. for my work, but it is different to be speaking on being from Louisville, Kentucky, my growing up there, and how that influenced where I got today, and that anybody can do these things and to inspire, hopefully, inspire kids and students that, they're from Kentucky. They think maybe they can't do things because they're from Kentucky or they live there and they're stuck, or maybe whatever, I want to influence and inspire people to, you can do anything you want. And, it was, it's a great thing. You can really just have a dream and go for it.
Well, and there is a sort of a student briefing opportunity that they're describing it. You're going to interact, you and Brooke are going to interact with students. And
Yeah.
what do you know about that? Like, do you know what you be doing there, or is that still being determined? Because as we speak,
No.
this is October the 12th.
Oh,
No, you and I
no.
October the 12th.
We're
So
out.
time for this to, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're sort of talking ahead of all this. So
Right.
some details could still be worked.
Well, actually, we have the schedule pretty set up. They're just working on logistics, but there will be a group of students, like they said, probably around 50 or more beforehand, and that's just kind of a Q&A. We'll talk a little bit, Brooke and I will talk a little bit about what we do, and then we'll have a Q&A with the students. And that's more of an intimate discussion, small group. And then we do the talk at 6:30, with the 5:30 they have snacks and drinks at 5:30, and then we talk at 6:30. And that's a bigger crowd. That's like the main event. That's the one that's going to be televised and recorded. And then the next day, I am also speaking at Ballard, and that's the one where they're bringing in a lot of students from a lot of different schools, but it's mostly media related or art related. So art students and animation students, media students, and so I'll talk more about my career there.
And were you a Ballard alum?
No, I went to St. Francis.
Sorry, that's right. You said it earlier. And
No, it's
that was St. Francis, and they had moved down to Third Street, right near your.
right. We were like, I think the third graduating class or something. We were early.
Yeah, yeah. Um, you mentioned that you had done time you were at Disney for a while. So
Mhm.
look at all these titles. What were you working on at Disney? Was it one of these shows that I'm talking about, or was that another experience that's not listed on the bio?
Oh no, it's on there. Well, I don't know if it's on my bio. I recently worked on Amphibia, but that was mostly I was not supervising. That was a break from supervising, which was really nice, and it's a beautiful show. Um, Originally, my first job at Disney was art directing a show called Nightmare Ned, and that was in the 90s. And I got to design the look and be the art director for the series. But it was kind of ahead of its time, and Disney aired it once and then shelved it. It would be a great show to air now. Like, I think everyone would love it because it was a little different, and now different is good, but back then it wasn't. Um, so not many people have seen it, but the artwork was amazing, and that was a really fun job. So that was my first job at Disney. But I go back and forth, go to Disney off and on for different shows.
So Nightmare Ned is not hiding on Disney Plus if I type it into the search.
No, but you know what? Talk about it, because let's get it on there.
Nightmare Ned. There we go.
Nightmare Ned. It was a really great show. It was really, really good. And our directors were incredible. We had incredible talent. Everybody went off to do, as always, you work with people, you're just having fun, laughing, and making this great stuff. And then they go off and they direct Shrek, or they direct, and it's like, you're like, wow, everybody's so talented. And everyone's so successful now.
Have you ever had any opportunities to work on a feature film?
I have. I worked on the Powerpuff Girl movie, and yeah, and I worked on the Jetsons movie. I did assistant animation on that, and what else? I've worked on a couple of things, but like in smaller roles.
I can't say that I'm so devoted to any particular animated show, but I remember when Powerpuff Girls was on, I was real a big fan. And I don't remember too much. There was an episode with broccoli aliens, I remember, that was just a riot. But I love the whole idea of Powerpuff Girls. So like out of all your credits, that actually might be the one that for me was like, she did a Powerpuff Girl movie. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun movie to work on. And that was kind of, I started working with Craig McCracken on, he's the show creator on Two Stupid Dogs. And Donovan Cook was in charge of that show back then, but it was at Hanna-Barbera. So I met those guys at Hanna-Barbera, and then I just kept working with them. It was really great. They just kept rehiring me for different jobs. So that was
No,
nice.
that's an old name too, Hanna-Barbera. Is that studio still going?
No, Hanna-Barbera became Cartoon Network. They sold it to Cartoon Network.
All right. I missed that transition. But that goes way back. That was Saturday mornings for me were Looney Tunes, and Hanna-Barbera was producing, it seemed like half the stuff that was on the air back then.
Right. They were the best. They were awesome.
So,
Yeah.
well, so when you do we, I often, when I'm talking to people, when I'm talking to artists, you tend to, there used to be the old model for visual artists that you got to go to New York or you got to go to somewhere. And, but we live in a world now where you can live a lot of places and very much
Hmm.
in an art career, is that possible for animators, or do you still need to go to LA or New York or someplace like that?
That is a really good question. And I mean, I do get asked that a lot by students, but that's an important question. Um, I personally believe you should. You should be with people in that field. I've talked to so many people who even worked in New York for a long time in animation, but there isn't enough of it there to keep people busy all the time. And like Blue Sky was there for a while doing features, but they only did one, at a time. And so the problem is there isn't enough work for everybody there. And if you move to LA, to this area, Southern California, you'll get a ton of work. You just need to be like around everybody. If you walk down the street, San Fernando Road in Burbank, and you go into any restaurant during lunch, you will run into people from every studio. DreamWorks, Disney, Cartoon Network, Rick and Morty, every studio, they're right there, and everyone's out eating lunch at the same time. And really, that's kind of how you get work, is the socializing and keeping contacts up to date. So I recommend at least doing it at the beginning of your career. Um, later, like at this age, like I could pretty much live anywhere, but even still, I'd be worried I might not get enough work. So I think it's good to be around the studios and go in and meet the executives, meet the producers. So they put a face to the name and they know who you are. And also, you want to know if people are crazy too, because sometimes you'll hire someone and they might be insane. So you really do want to meet people and know that they're like, okay.
Even though the technology might allow someone to do something from a distance, as a professional um, practice, it's not what you recommend.
It's not what I recommend. I know that it's possible, but I don't think it's easy. I do know people who've moved back to where they're from or moved away, and they do have a hard time. They have to hit the pavement a lot harder than the rest of us who are in this area. So it's not easy. I mean, you can do it. It's just not as easy. Um, I mean, when I started in animation, you really had to be here. There was enough work in New York back then, like in the 80s and the early 90s. They still had a lot of studios in New York going, but that ended pretty quickly. I think somewhere around the 2000s.
Well, and that's coming from somebody who's a legend. So you could probably somewhere, but you still choose to be there in the community. And maybe that's the whole thing, right? It is a community.
It is a community, and it's a great community. Like I've never met such amazingly kind people. Artists in general are just really good people. They're nice people. There's an occasional jerk, but even still, you'll work well together, even if you don't get along personally. But when someone has a parent die or needs help with something, or they have cancer, or the whole community bands together and raises funds, helps out. They organize like, food delivery services, So it's kind of a tight community. Even though we're all competing against each other for the work, we're all very supportive of each other at the same time.
Well, I think people that are other parts of the country, I wonder sometimes they understand that in Hollywood there is a sense of community. I mean, the recent strikes, I would think, illustrate that very well.
They do. I mean, we were out there picketing with the writers and the actors. The actors were out there picketing the second the writers went on strike. Yeah, and people, I am so glad you brought that up because I do read like on social media all the negative comments about, oh, Hollywood, who cares? It's like it's a job like any other job. It's like your job is your job, my job is my job, but it's all the same. We're all trying to feed our kids and pay the rent. It's not, there's no difference, between it's all trying to survive.
And the face of the strikes are always the movie stars, right? Because that's who people know, and then they think, yeah, but we won't have to go through it all, but yeah, 99% of the people in SAG-AFTRA are working like a middle class or lower middle class, or maybe even lower.
Lower.
Sometimes they're waiting tables between jobs. So, I thought that was a very good strategy on their part. Let's not put the movie stars out on the lines because that's exactly the wrong thing.
Right. Yeah. People don't know. They don't realize. Like, it's all of us who, like I was just, because of the strikes, I was laid off for no, 9 months the first time. This last strike for 3 months. And it's rough. Like, you have to find a way to survive without any income.
And are you a union member?
Oh, yeah.
So you're
I'm in the animation guild.
okay. So you guys weren't on strike, but you were in support of the.
Well, we have no work. If the
Yeah.
writers aren't
Well,
writing,
you said you went out on the picket lines. You didn't really have to do that, but you chose to
no. Right. We
because you were.
chose to picket.
Yeah, right.
Right, right. But because the writers were out of work and the actors also, it shut down all the productions. The only productions that were going were children's cartoons, like some of the Disney shows and Nickelodeon shows.
Well, I have a friend who's an actor and an editor and director out there, and he's always posting pictures on his social media on the front lines, and I said, you know what though, you look like you're having too good a time. I don't
Right.
want like we're standing out in the California sunshine, and we all know each other, and we're just having a great time. I don't know. Is that really the message you want to put out? I'm glad
you
you
know,
all,
I
but
I think we're really good at promoting positive images, but it's yeah, when you're out there picketing for 4 hours, it's yeah, the pictures are fun. Yeah, we're having fun, but really, you're hot and sweaty, and you're hungry and tired of chanting, and you know, it's it's not fun. And then you're like, how am I going to pay my rent?
seems like you're sort of unhappy and grumbly, and you should be doing a fist and not going, "Hey."
Right, doing selfies. Yeah, selfie with my sign. Yeah.
Well, hopefully the SAG-AFTRA strike will be over soon. It seems to me like it ought to be over now because so many of the issues were the same. Now we're sort of getting into the weeds on the industry now, but the strike was settled. It seems like that should have basically given a template to SAG-AFTRA's negotiations. We'll have to see, I guess, though.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's why it was so important for us all to back up the writers because they started. it's like what you said, it's a template. And we negotiate next year, it's going to be the same template. So we all have the same things we need.
Right. Well,
Mhm.
we're about out of time here. I could, I always, I say, I'm happy that I get to say most of the time, I could just keep doing this. We could just keep,
Me too.
and we actually just got into the kind of stuff that I really love, which is all the sort of, the entertainment industry stuff. I'm a real movie guy and behind
Yay.
stuff. So, but thank you so much, Carol Wyatt. So, you're going to be here next week when this airs. That'll be a week later or so. You'll be here November 1st at the Speed Museum as part of the Kentucky to the World Series, which brings legendary Louisville artists home.
Yeah,
Tell
promoting an image of Kentucky that we need to see, that people have come from Kentucky and done some cool stuff out there.
Yep. There's a lot of us. We're well, I'm
There
not
are.
here, but there's a lot of people. A lot of people.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you. It was really nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.